Welcome to our Saturday teaching. It's no coincidence that from the very first pages of Genesis, God uses the imagery of trees to describe the human soul. In the Garden of Eden, life and choice were represented by two trees, establishing a blueprint for how we are meant to grow and where we're to draw our life from. The Bible doesn't just mention trees, it also uses them as a mirror for us. Psalm 1 tells us that a person who delights in the Lord is like a tree planted by streams of water. Now take a look at the image on the screen. We often focus on the leaves, the parts of our lives that everyone can see. But today we're looking at what's happening in the dark, under the dirt. James chapter 1 verses 1 through 12 isn't just a lesson on how to survive the sunshine. It's also a manual on how to develop a root system so deep, so resilient, that when the storms of life arrive, and I say when the storms of life, because they will come, they find you simply unmovable. Let's explore how we build a faith that endures. When we look at this slide, we see a scene that is calm and serene. We see the branches reaching out, full of green leaves and glowing in the sunlight. In our own lives, this represents our visible life, our outward personality, our reputation, our accomplishments, the version of us that people normally see on a sunny day. James addresses in chapter 1, verse 2 and 3, this outward reality by speaking of various trials. To anyone passing by, this tree looks stable as long as the weather is clear. But James is telling us to count it all joy when those trials come. And again, they will come. Because the pressure on the outside is what proves the strength of what is on the inside. This serene image reminds us that while our branches may look beautiful now, the testing of our faith is what determines if we will stay standing when the seasons change. To understand how these branches stay so vibrant, we have to look at what is hidden beneath the surface. Now we see what was hidden. As we pull back the soil, we see the vast, glowing root system that supports everything we saw in the last slide. James tells us in verse 4 to let steadfastness have its full effect. This is the deep work. The reasons the branches can reach so high in the sun is because these roots have grown deep into the earth. God's goal isn't just a beautiful outward appearance. He wants faith that is perfect and complete, lacking in nothing, from the deepest root to the highest leaf. Looking at this tree, you can see a clear split right down the center. In nature, a tree like this is fragile because it does not have one solid core. When a strong wind hits that split, it can easily pull the two sides apart. And it's a tree now that is divided against itself. James chapter 1 verses 6 through 8, we can see what he's talking about here. He calls this being double-minded. It's that internal struggle where part of you wants to trust God, but the other part is pulled away by worry or doubt. When our heart is split like this, we become unstable. We lose our grip on faith because we're being pulled in two different directions at once. And that's why I skipped verse 5. Now I'm going back to that. This is why in verse 5, James tells us to ask for wisdom, because God gives it generously, because he knows we need it in order to be whole. Wisdom is what closes the gaps in our heart. It fuses our focus back into one single solid pillar. When we ask God for wisdom, he heals that division so we can stand firm and unmovable no matter how hard the wind blows. James describes in verses 9 through 11 a scorching heat that withers the grass. You can see the contrast here. The trees standing tall, but the grass at its feet is yellow and dry. This represents different seasons of our lives. Sometimes everything is green and flourishing. Other times the heat of trials make everything around us feel dry and empty. James is reminding us that our circumstances are temporary. They change like the weather. If we only live for what we can see on the surface, we will wither. But a faith that endures is one that draws from a deeper source. Whether you're in a season of plenty or a season of lack, your strength isn't found in your situation. It's being rooted and grounded in Jesus. When we look at this tree, we see an image that has changed from struggle to victory. This tree is now topped with a crown and a laurel wreath. In the ancient world, a wreath wasn't just decoration. It was a prize to an athlete who finished the race and refused to quit. James tells us in verse 12, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life." This is the ultimate why behind everything we've discussed. We don't grow deep roots just for the sake of surviving. We grow them for the sake of the promise. James is reminding us that there is a purpose to the pressure. The wind, the heat, and the testing are all refining us for a reward that does not wither like grass. The crown isn't earned by our own strength, but is promised to those who love him. Our endurance is simply our love for God in action, proving that he is worth more than the trial we are walking through. We have looked at the anatomy of a faith that lasts. We've seen that it requires a heart that isn't split by doubt, and a root system that goes deeper than the temporary scorching seasons of life. But as we close, look at this image one last time. Notice that the tree isn't just surviving. It is radiating. And you may ask the question, why? And the answer is because it has reached the goal of its growth. James 4 tells us to let endurance have its full effect. This is the effect. You see, in the dark, those roots were pushing through the soil, and they eventually hit something that would not move. They hit the solid rock. In your life, the trials that you're facing, the rock in your soul isn't there to stop you. It's there to steady you. That rock is Jesus Christ. Once the roof of your faith hit the solid rock, the struggle changes. You're no longer trying to stand by your own strength. You're simply holding on to the only thing that cannot be shaken. So I leave you with this command on the screen. Be ye steadfast, unmovable. The wind will blow, the grass will wither, and the seasons will change. But when your faith is gripped to the rock, you are secure. Don't let go. Stand firm in the wisdom of God. Stay anchored in the love of Christ. And walk in the victory of the crown that never fades. The roof of your faith have hit the rock, and he will never let go. God bless.